This video is for the final bag assembly. So this is Bagception time, or bag within a bag. I started teaching this bag over 10 years ago to students, and that's when the movie Inception came out, so they dubbed it Bagception. And the name has stuck ever since. So if that helps you at all, bag within a bag time. So you might wonder how all of this gets attached. We have an outside bag that's got my flap and my strap attached to it, and I've got my lining bag here with a facing attached to it. Basically, you want to turn your lining bag inside out. We have to get things to match up right side to right side. So the best way to do that is to turn this bag inside out and leave your outer bag right side out. So here's my outer bag. This also is important to know at this point which is your front and back. So obviously on the back side of your outer bag is where your flap is. But if you have a predetermined place that your pockets are on your lining, decide that now, because that will affect how you put things together. So if I determine I want my pocket on the front side of my lining, then I will match it up to the front side of my outside bag. So I'm going to put the entire outside bag inside the lining bag. And you may think I'm completely wacky right now, but trust me, this will work. Then I'm going to start matching up these edges. And I want to make sure that the flap and the strap stay down. And you're going to say, again, Rachel, you're nuts. How do they operate? How do they come outside the bag if the flap and the strap are all tucked in there? Well, everything gets sewn inside out, and then we are going to turn it right side out. So it will be sewn correctly if I follow these steps. So I want to make sure that my sides line up. So anywhere that you have a seam, make sure that those seams line up. So you can see that here's my strap right here, and this is the side of my outside bag. So I'm going to match it up with the facing here so that it would match up this side of the bag. And your layers are going to start to get thick, especially if you used cotton canvas. You've got multiple layers of seam allowance and everything going on in here. So pin this well. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side and do the same thing. I'm matching up seams so that the side is lined up in both the inside and the outside bag. Then we're going to start pinning all the way around this top edge. So kind of like when we put the facing on, this entire loop of the upper lip of the bag is going to get sewn together. The next thing I want to do as I begin pinning this is I want to determine where my opening is going to be, because unlike the facing, I cannot sew completely in a circle and still pull everything right side out. I have to leave a hole. I have to leave an escape to be able to turn my bag. So you want to make sure that you leave about 4 or 5 inches somewhere on your bag. I recommend this back side here instead of the front of your bag, even though the front of your bag is fewer layers to deal with. The back side of your bag, you can hide the finishing hand stitch a little bit better. So I'm going to put different colored pins in the center, leaving a several inch gap that I can stick enough to basically stick my hand in and grab the bag and pull it all the way through. Those will be your start and stop points, meaning I will start at the blue pin, so all the way around the bag, and end up back at the orange pin. Again, not sewing the bag completely shut, leaving this gap to turn the bag through. Now the front portion, there go my scissors. The front portion I can pin completely because I will sew all of that. So again, just make sure the bag matches up all nice and neat. You don't have to stretch this part of the bag. You just want to make sure it meets and that there's no gaps, no bubbles, that you pin this all really well. So I've almost made it. You're going to stitch basically this facing piece to the outer bag portion at a 1/2 inch, just like you did everything else. That's why we attached our flap and our strap at 3/8 of an inch, because that gave us a little bit of space so that we don't see that previous stitching when we're complete. Okay, now I'm finally ready to sew. So we're almost there. I'm going to zoom this in so you can see just a little bit better. And again, I'm starting at one of my markers, so whether I marked that with a chalk or a pencil or a different colored pin, however you want to mark it, but I'm starting at that start point, and I'm going to stop at the opposite stop point. Make sure your seams stay flat and open as you run over them. Oops, I faced my pins the wrong way. Hilarious. This is why you face your pins all the same direction instead of what I just did. And I'm almost to my end point, getting really close. So you can see that orange pin is my stopping point. And I want to make sure at my start and my stop that I backstitch, because I will be pulling and pushing on the bag a lot when I turn it through. So I definitely want to make sure that that is good and reinforced. Okay, now it is magic time. We are going to pull the bag entirely through this little hole that I left. So this is the part that gets kind of weird. It will be a little challenging if you didn't leave your hole quite big enough to get the outer thicker portion of the bag through, but you're going to work the bag gently through the hole so that it all turns right side out. It will look really weird at first, and then it'll make a lot more sense in just a second. So now I got the outer bag through, working the lining bag through. And it magically made a thing. It's kind of bizarre. Okay. So this is my lining at the top attached to my outer bag. And you're like, Rachel, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. I promise. You are going to now take your lining, because now it just made like this giant weird pillow rectangle thing. Take your lining and just stuff it inside the bag. And I have a bag. You can see that here. Look, and the strap is on the outside. See, I said, trust me. The flap is on the outside, and the flap kind of flops this way, and it's become a complete bag. I'm not quite done yet. I want to go back and iron this top edge so it's nice and crisp and smooth, and then press it just like we did the flap and the strap with the seam right on the edge so the front of the bag is nice and crisp. And then I also want to press the back of the bag where the facing meets the flap, and this is my hole right here. So I'm going to press my seam allowance, fold in my seam allowance and press it flat across the back. And then I'm going to use a slip stitch, a hand stitch, to close this completely so that you can't tell where you started and stopped sewing that bag. And then finally, I will add some kind of closure to it. So I can put a snap on my flap as it goes onto the front of my bag. I could put that in the corners or the center. I could put buttonholes through my flap and then put buttons on the bag. There's several ways to approach it, but you need at least one closure of some kind. You could have more if you wish. You need to make sure that you iron the whole upper edge, making the front and the side nice and smooth and crisp, and the back flat, and slip stitch your hole closed.